Hey, ladies, welcome to episode 101 of the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer D'Amato, and I have such a treat for you today. My dear friend, Dr. Maggie Landes, is on the podcast today. She is a board certified physician, a public health nutritionist, and an anti diet wellness expert. Now, I'm guessing most of you don't want to sit down and read scientific studies, do statistical analysis in your free time. I know I spent years doing that with my degree, and I have spent a lot of time in the last year reading study after study to be able to become a certified intuitive eating counselor. But I know you don't probably want to do that. Thankfully, Maggie has done all the work for us. Now, don't get worried. We're not going to be on here talking about scientific studies. We're not going to be analyzing data, nothing like that, thankfully. But what you will hear about that might blow your mind. In this interview, you're also going to learn what led Maggie to practice in this anti diet space as a board certified doctor, and what she discovered when she spent the time digging into the research and statistics on weight loss. I want you to listen in for her fundamental belief around the human body. You're going to love it. Then she is going to be dropping one truth bomb after another. Have you ever thought, why do I keep on dieting? Why do I go back even though I know it doesn't work? Maggie's got something for you you don't want to miss. Before we dive in, I just want to say I know I have a doctor here on the podcast, but just a friendly reminder that all content shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered to be a diagnosis or treatment plan. Without further ado, let's dive into this interview with Dr. Maggie Landes. Welcome to the Health, Life, and More for Women podcast. My name is Jennifer D'Amato, a certified intuitive eating counselor, coach, mom of four, lover of all things pink, and I want you to live your best health and your best life. I believe the way we can all do that is by finally walking away from diet culture, by relearning what your body needs, reconnecting with your body's biological signals, and redefining what health is on your terms. This show will shed some light on sneaky ways diet culture has infiltrated your thoughts, your family, and your well-being. My heart is that no matter the episode, you walk away feeling informed, inspired, and encouraged. Let's go. Well, thanks, Maggie, for joining us on the podcast today. I'm so glad that you are here and excited to dive into what we're talking about today.
Yes. Well, thank you, Jen, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Now, listen, we have a really cool opportunity to sit down with a board certified physician, but I really want to know a little bit more about you, share with the ladies listening, and then what got you into this space of anti-diet and wellness and all of this.
Right. Well, this anti-diet space, people, that's the first question they ask is, have you always been like this? No. Not to spoiler alert, but no, if you've met anybody who's quote, always been like this, they're probably not telling you the truth, honestly.
I agree.
But I'm a physician. I'm a board certified. I'm actually a pediatrician, and I've been practicing for almost 20 years at this point. I also have a graduate degree in public health nutrition. But let me tell you what, this diet culture disrupting, mission that I'm on happened after I had a personal kind of life health event. It was the turning point for the entire narrative on health in my brain.
Yeah, Maggie, would you tell us a little bit about that? Because I do think it's really poignant to what led you here.
Right. So, I mean, the bottom line is traditional medical education is diet culture focused, weight centric. It has been that way for decades, probably centuries, and it still is even now. So I was part of that, just like everybody else who's been sort of schooled in that way. Well, I was diagnosed with cancer right after my 40th birthday, which is now almost 5 years ago. And in that, and I'm recovered, by the way, and I'm in remission and I'm doing fine. That's not the point of the story.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. But the point of the story is I was forced to sort of take a professional pause, if you will. I was out of work for about 6 months getting chemotherapy and everything. And in that place, I decided to do a kind of independent study, if you want to say like that. I wanted to learn what was the perfect, quote, perfect human diet,
Mm.
because I was certain that it was out there and I was certain that I was capable of finding it. And now, thanks to having this break, I had time to like really dig in deep. Okay. So reading articles, going to, meetings and I'm not talking like looking at Instagram and stuff, but reading books and all, really informing myself because I was going to find the answer. Isn't that weird? That's so diluted. But
I think it's more common than not, but please continue.
yes. Well, and to preface that by saying I was like, a product of diet culture. Besides my professional training, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I mean, low fat everything, we
Yep.
got the Slim Fast and the Deal a Meal and the Pie Master, the whole bit. So I realized that not only was there not a perfect human diet that eluded me up till this point, I also realized that there was very little scientific evidence to support all this weight centric healthcare that we collectively have been delivering to patients. And I did what any, good person does is I think, well, it's probably me. Like at this point, I was 15, 17 years ago since I went to school. I probably am like sort of outdated, right?
Mm.
So we talked about this before. I'm an Enneagram 3. This is what you do.
Everyone on the podcast already knows that I am too. I love it, Maggie.
Okay. Well, so there we have that in common. So this is what Enneagram 3s do to answer questions in their lives. They go to graduate school because that just seems like the next logical step in our
More
brains.
training, more knowledge, do it.
Well,
Yep.
yes, do it big, do it big. So I went back to graduate. You can't go to medical school twice. I mean, that really would have been the best controlled experiment, is to go back to medical school again 20 years later, but nobody does that. That was even beyond Enneagram 3. So I said, I'm going to go get a graduate degree in nutrition. And certainly they must be teaching these, future dietitians of America something different than what I learned in medical school. And I can just prove to myself that I was sort of like behind, and I get myself up to speed, and then we all move along with our profession. Well, lo and behold, punchline is no, they're still teaching this antiquated, weight-centered, diet culture influenced way of approaching nutrition and health now we're talking the 21st century, well into the 21st century. So that's when I thought, this is not right. This is not right. And with the amount of disordered eating and eating disorders and weight cycling and mental health issues and all these things that are really come out of our obsession with health and nutrition in our bodies, like it's never going to change if the quote professionals, and I shouldn't say quote, they are professionals. I mean, doctors and PAs and nurse practitioners and dietitians are professionals. If we aren't teaching what is evidence-based, there is no hope for anybody else. I mean, the bottom line is the lay public is not going to be spending their time looking up articles on PubMed and doing like, a statistical analysis of the results. Like, I don't expect that out of any kind of average person. That's not what they're trained to do. That's not what they want to do. But I do hold health professionals accountable for delivering evidence-based information to, otherwise, if you don't do that, it's like a bad game of telephone. It really is. Like, if the original person doesn't even get it right from the beginning, there is zero chance that the person at the end is going to receive accurate information. And that's what I feel like we're sort of doing. That was a very long answer to your very
but it was
question.
it was really good though, Maggie, because I think what struck you, which was, I'm going to find the perfect answer, right? The perfect
That's
diet,
what we're
or the
all
perfect
doing,
way.
right?
That is what every single person thinks, I think that same thought of, well, I'm going to find the answer. No one else has found it. So what happens is, though, I'd say for the average person, I'm going to raise my hand as an average person back when I was in that space of, well, then I'll just try this diet. I'll go, this one didn't work for me, so it must not have been that. I must need this one. And I just keep in that same diet loop,
Right.
because I'm not reading. Well, at the time, again, wasn't reading studies and publications and all of that.
And you're not expected to. That's the whole point, is that we're not expected to. It's just, we think that it's out there and the next one is going to be, quote, it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's it. And then it's like, well, that didn't really work. But then this next new shiny thing, well, there's just a tidbit of something that seems convincing enough. And that's one of the problems. There's so many problems, but one of the problems is that all this diet culture stuff, it does start a lot of those programs and plans and apps and all this sort of stuff starts with a teeny tiny morsel of truth. It's not like it was just fantasized out of thin air. It really does start with something, but the second that that is taken out of context and applied to all people
Mm.
and blown so far out of proportion that we don't even know which end is up, then it is meaningless and in some cases harmful, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it starts with just enough. We're not dumb. I mean, most people are not totally dumb. There are some. Oh, I mean,
We won't name them by
we
name
won't name
here
them
on
by
the
name, but
podcast.
listen, if you're listening to this podcast, you are not one of them. You are smart. So, but we can sense complete garbage usually. So, in order for diet culture to work, there has to be like a little teeny morsel of not garbage so that we get hooked on it, so that we believe in it, so that we commit to it.
Yeah. So
Because
I
we're
think,
not, yeah,
Maggie, a great example of this, I think, is what keto has done. You and I grew up in that same time where fat was like from the devil. It was evil, no fat, no fat. And so keto brings in this place of, wait a minute, I can have fat, which of course you can have fat, you can have proteins and carbohydrates and all these things. And what it did, it had that sliver. I mean, and I'm grabbing here, but this sliver of like truth of, yes, you should have all of these macronutrients, you should have fat. But then what it does is it goes completely bonkers and cuts out a whole other food group, which of course it cuts out your carbohydrates, which again, your body needs. So I
right,
love that take on it where I have fats, I eat avocado and I have oil and other things and ice cream and all of those things too. And yet I enjoy all of the foods available to me, and where keto comes in. And then they take it all the way to the other side is, but now you cut out something else.
right. Well, let's take one step back here because the my fundamental belief is that the human body works. I mean, it works.
That's amazing. I love it.
Okay. I mean, the default condition is it works because it has to, truthfully. And whether you look at that with divine creation or just good engineering or whatever, like it has to work or we would not exist as a species. So we can all agree that it in most cases the default is working.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the way that the body works has not changed in probably thousands of years, maybe longer than that. So to think that, just as you said, in the 80s and 90s where fat was awful and so we just ate all carbohydrates, and then 20 years later now we can't eat carbohydrates and we eat all fat, like the fact that these things are changing in this sort of cyclical way within 10 or 20 years of time is just evidence that that's not based in human physiology, because human physiology in 1984 is exactly the same as it is in 2021. But yet the recommendations from the quote experts are completely polarized opposites. And so that by the controversy is the evidence that it's not good evidence.
That's so good. That's so good.
Right?
I feel like if it would make a lot of noise, I'd do like a mic drop right there.
Right.
That's so good.
Yeah. It's the fact that we are all so confused. That in and of itself is the evidence that there's not one way to do this. Because if there was one way, trust me, we would have figured it out. Somebody would have figured it out. We would have all done it. It would be like over, and there wouldn't be like a conversation anymore.
Oh my gosh.
There would be no debate. There would be no competition because the winner would win, right?
Yeah. I always say if diets worked, it would work. It would
and
work.
We would be done by now. That's what I say. If diets worked, we would be done by now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, factually, Maggie, we can know that. Right. But I think that's where that comma comes in the but.
Yes.
But we don't take action that reflects that thought. I'm curious your perspective on that. So, we can all know that. And maybe there's women listening, like they're nodding their head, like, I know that I've done 16, 25, 30, whatever it is, diets. I've dieted for X amount of years. And I know factually it doesn't work, but I keep going.
Right. Well, and I think some of that is fear that what else am I supposed to do? Like, is there another way to do something? Like, it's very scary to, like, even though we don't like diets, basically, I mean, we can all, I mean, nobody likes diets. Even the people doing them don't like them. The people who manufacture them don't even like them. That's why they don't call them a diet.
Oh
So
my gosh, I love it. I love one truth bomb after another. Keep
well,
going.
exactly. So, but there is something about predictability. There is something about structure. There is something about being told what to do by a, expert or an authority that we do like. We do like that infrastructure of dieting to some degree. And so when you say, I'm going to just stop dieting, like that is like, it's kind of like a disorienting, I guess is a good word.
Yeah.
Cause it's like, then what do
What
I
do I
do? Like,
do?
how do I,
Exactly.
cause that's what my clients are like, okay, I get it. Like, it doesn't take much convincing to tell them diets suck. They already came to me because diets suck.
Diets
So
suck. Mhm.
that doesn't take a lot of, convincing, but then they're like, and what do I cook for dinner tonight? Like, what do I order at the restaurant? What I'm pushing my grocery cart through the store, and I literally don't know what to put in the cart because every decision I've made around food for 20, 30, 40 years has revolved around a diet culture idea telling me what to do. And now if that little voice is not telling me, what is telling me? So I think
Mm.
they're kind of lost. I think that's,
Yes.
and I can tell you, I felt like that too. I was like, there's got to be something to make this a comfortable transition, because just pulling out the diet security blanket and saying no more diets, now eat and Godspeed with you, it doesn't like it doesn't work like that.
No, and it invokes the pendulum swing. I share a lot about that pendulum swing because once you let go of the diet, you very likely swing all the way to the other side. And you actually maybe have done that for years because of eventually what's happened and you've been drawn back in, right, to the next diet for
Well, that's what we
whatever.
do on like a micro scale between like, Friday night and Monday morning. I mean, that's,
Mm.
in our dieting life, it was like just a smaller version of that. It's like restrict, 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 restrict. And then usually for me, when I was dieting, it went off the rails Thursday night happy hour after work, and then it's sort of like, then Friday was kind of like a whatever. And then the weekend was like a whole big, whatever, because
Mm.
Monday I am going to this is the last Monday I'm doing this. I'm going to be so serious. I'm going, you're going to be this different person until the following Thursday.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
like the little pendulum swinging back and forth week to week. And now, if you look at the big picture, it's like we're going to take diet culture totally away, and your dieting infrastructure, it is like a giant pendulum.
Yeah.
And it's scary. I mean, it is scary. But see, this is where the intuitive eating, and I know you use intuitive eating framework to
Mm-hmm.
help people make this transition, and I think that is one of the major utilities of it, is to fill that space where they need something sort of structured to
Mm-hmm.
think about, so it's not just this like free fall of what, like this nebulous no man's land. Like, that's in my mind where intuitive eating like kind of can bridge that gap.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great thing. I always say, when we're replacing thoughts, you don't want to leave an empty space there. So let's fill it with another thought, the one you want to be thinking. And that's a
Right.
great way to even look at how intuitive eating for the beginning part can fill that space, because you and I both know it is not this rigid rule following practice. But I love this idea that it comes in, kind of gives you some structure, some framework, because I do think it's personalized and should be, but it gives
Yes.
you that starting point. Maggie, you brought something up that, I really want to dive into here, because there's these external forces, that kind of tell us what to do, right? That thing that guides us. Oh, follow a diet, do this. And some of that's coming when we go to those yearly doctor's appointments, or quite frankly, any. And we're left leaving with, so they told me I need to lose weight. Now what? Why? What's going on? And going to the doctors becomes even this tainted experience based on my weight. I'd love if you could speak to that, because I think a lot of women want to feel more empowered and not feel defeated even before they go to a doctor's appointment, when they're in a larger body or they're not, or maybe especially after this last year and a half their body has shifted and changed, so there's some fear about going to a doctor's appointment and having that feedback given to them. How would you suggest to approach these kind of appointments?
Right. Well, and that is a big issue because our healthcare system, and I can speak from this country, and most westernized countries, I think, are sort of in line with this. We have a weight centric view of health. We do. And there's reasons we do. Some of it has to do with the inadequate kind of education, incomplete education of the doctors and providers. Some of it is the fact that we have such a overwhelming diet culture, a social diet culture here that, let's just be honest, doctors are just people. So, I mean, as much as I've studied and gone to school and all this sort of stuff, like I still go to the same grocery store, look at the same internet as all my patients. I mean, we're
Mhm.
still subject to our personal, sort of social biases. And our healthcare system is like really certain aspects of it are totally broken. I mean, when you have 10 or 12, if you're lucky, 15 minutes with a patient once a
Mm.
year, maybe twice a year. I mean, you and I have already been talking twice that long and we haven't even scratched the surface. So to assume that a doctor, even if they are as objective as possible and they're informed as possible, can unpack this kind of stuff in a clinical encounter is almost unreasonable to expect, and
Mhm.
so because there's also a million other things, we're supposed to be screening for all this other stuff too. So and I'm not throwing out excuses for the doctor. There's no excuse for stigmatizing and weight shaming patients, period. There is no excuse for that.
Thank you.
But I can see how it happens. I
Mhm.
can see how it happens because we've just got to keep moving. And from what we know, I want to say that in most cases, it does not come from a malicious place. Like doctors they don't come to work in the morning and say, I wonder if I can make the fat people in my practice so mad that they never come back. Like nobody's saying that, right?
Mhm.
But most doctors are fairly ignorant of the science of weight regulation and
Mhm.
health at every size and all these things that we know, this sort of evolved science that we know. And so we unfortunately bring that into the exam room. And on top of the kind of power dynamic that exists between a doctor and a patient, and the way we have it set up. So let me just say, when you go to a doctor's appointment, it is a weight centered experience from the word go.
Mm.
I mean, there's doctors' offices that don't even have appropriate seating in the waiting room for people in large
Mm.
bodies. And then you go from the waiting room you get weighed in the hallway usually before, at least in my doctor, before you even get to the exam room. It's like you get dragged through the hallway. Here's the scale. The first thing that gets entered is your weight, and it, comes up as a diagnosis code if you're in the quote obese category, all this sort. Then
Mm.
you go and put on a gown that doesn't fit, and then you go in the exam room where they can't find a blood pressure cuff that fits your arm, and all like it is a negative experience from the beginning before the doctor has honestly even come in the room. And then that
Mm.
is just like the icing on the cake when the doctor comes in. And particularly if you're in a large body, your weight is the problem and weight loss is the solution. And
Mm.
that is almost universal advice, whether your problem is back pain or migraines or acne or anxiety or blah, 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 blah. Fill in the blank. It doesn't even matter.
Mhm.
It The experience of going to a doctor in a large body is frequently the epicenter is, you know, and that's just it's wrong. It's wrong. And I will be the first to admit I am guilty of practicing in that way for up until I had cancer and learned better, truthfully.
Mm.
Okay, there's two problems. The first problem is the individual patient is not getting the care they deserve. Okay, I mean they're not getting if the only problem is your weight and the only answer is weight loss, that is not complete clinical information. There is not a single disease where it only exclusively occurs in large people. Not one of them.
Yep.
And let me tell you what, the doctors in the exam rooms with the skinny patients are not like shaking their heads, like all confused. Well, what? Can't believe that you have diabetes. I mean, you're thin. I have no idea. I don't know what to do. I have no tools at my disposal. They're not saying that. Okay.
Right.
There's an answer for those people too. And you deserve that same answer because the
Yes.
answer should be independent of your size.
Yes.
The bigger scale, this is the public health part of me speaking, problem is when we make people's experience in the healthcare system so traumatizing and such a demoralizing experience, they don't come back at all to any doctor, not just that doctor. They don't go to any doctor. That's when bad goes to worse in a hot minute, because getting no healthcare is clearly bad for outcomes no matter what. I mean, that's not arguable at all. People who never see a doctor do less favorably than people who see some doctor somewhat intermittently. And then it perpetuates the cycle, because then the people that have been stigmatized and sit in their cars crying after the appointment and never, ever, ever go back, what makes them come back is a major problem. Like, I mean, not going to go back until there's like something big. 10 years later, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 years, who knows when they go back. But by the time you have a big problem, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
And then we collectively, we take all this data and we publish a study that says, well, look at this. All the fat people have breast cancer, or whatever you want to say, fill in the blank. And we don't account for the fact that we made the fat people feel so miserable about their healthcare experience. None of them did any of the proper preventative care or the stress of being traumatized and the sort of psychological damage of even going to a doctor. And then we publish this paper that says, fat causes breast cancer. And then we bring them all back and start beating them over the head and say, look, I told you shouldn't be fat. You know what I mean?
That's so insane. I mean, Maggie, you're bringing in such a great perspective of things that I know I didn't think of the entirety of the experience. I definitely start my visit on the scale, which I actually don't weigh myself. I do weight refusal at every appointment I go to. However, what I hear you saying is the totality of these appointments is even something I didn't consider as having such an impact on individuals.
Yeah. Well, and here's the very interesting part. The other side of the coin, and we're talking a lot about people in large bodies being marginalized, and they hands down absolutely have it worse. I mean, they do, because they have whatever's going on there. They have the social stigma of navigating a straight-sized environment in a large body. I mean, they are discriminated against in our culture, period.
Absolutely.
However, let me put this out there. The people in slender bodies aren't exactly getting the best healthcare either, because when you show up in your doctor's office at a quote normal body and nobody bothers to ask how you relate to food, what you're eating, what are your eating behaviors, what are your exercise habits? Do you have an eating disorder? Are you addicted to substances? Are you having depression? When we don't even ask, when we see your BMI as being, quote, wonderful, and we pat you on the back and say, congratulations, and essentially praise some stuff right in front of our faces, we're missing all those people too. We're missing an opportunity for health promotion also. So let me be honest that weight stigma affects people in all sizes of bodies. It's not exclusively people in large bodies. You're getting the short end of the stick if your doctor's not asking the right questions, irrespective of your size.
Yeah, that's so good. Maggie, I wonder what would have been different for me had my doctor at the time that I had in the height of my orthorexia had asked me about
because did they ever ask? Did they ever screen you for an eating disorder or anything even remotely close to that?
No, it was your weight's going down. Well done. Good job. Keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And without even knowing what the doing is. I mean, that's the scary part how are you going to tell somebody to keep up doing what they're doing when you haven't even asked what that is?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
it becomes
yeah,
this blanket, whatever you're doing is working, because the working means your body is being manipulated to be smaller. And again, you start believing that there is this connection, right? There's an equal sign that goes from smaller body is healthy, smaller body, you don't have these health issues that if you're in a larger body, you're going to have. You start believing that to be true.
sure. And you're going to absolutely believe it to be true if you go to doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment after dietitian's appointment, and every single person in a white coat has told you congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
Maggie,
of
I
course.
do you
Yeah.
remember it was sometime in the last couple of years, and I don't like to name drop often, but I'm going to throw this one out there because it actually is something that shook my world. Bob Harper, he was part of The Biggest Loser, and I could do a whole episode on my issues
Oh,
with The Biggest
mm,
Loser. I'm sure we could probably talk just for an episode about that, but he had a heart attack. And I almost about fell on the floor going, I don't understand. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense to me. And again, I know there's, some history, all of that stuff, but we're talking about, let's say, the poster child for fitness and quote
correct.
health. And he had a heart attack. And I went, I don't understand.
Yeah. So my opinion, and see, I've had, and he was, of course, he's sort of a public figure. But I hear this from time to time from just people in my life that I know. They're like, well, my, Uncle Joe just dropped dead of a stroke and he's only 55. And I'm so surprised. I mean, he's a runner and he's thin and blah, 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 blah. He always eats salad for lunch, whatever they say about Uncle Joe. In my opinion, if we were having the correct conversations in the office and screening for the actual health metrics, there would be far fewer surprises. Now, I'm not saying random things don't sometimes happen. Random things do sometimes happen. Okay, I got cancer, and I don't think my cancer was caused by anything specific that I did or was in my environment. But most of the time, I think the Uncle Joe that drops dead, who's a runner and eats salads, like there's probably something going on that somebody didn't figure out. Like there's something underlying. Like we're using the body size as and the sort of appearance of health, like Bob Harper, sort of like the visual,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, poster child of fitness. We're using this as an excuse to not actually figure out or investigate what is actually going on. And I don't, of course I'm not his doctor, I can't say anything intelligently about that, but it's just a distraction. The weight is always a distraction. It is almost never. I see, they teach us in medicine, never say never, because nothing is 100%, nothing is 0%. I'm pretty much a believer in that. So I won't say never, but I will say almost never. The weight is not the problem. I get doctors all the time, not all the time, but I do get some sort of doctors that send me emails and trolly messages like, I can't believe you're saying this. Obesity is a crisis and your license should be revoked and all this crazy stuff. I'm like, okay, then great. That's why
Have a good
Instagram has
day.
have
Have
a
a
good
good
day.
day.
Have a great day. Yes. But okay, what I would like to ask these people, I first of all, I just block them. I don't have time for that. But if I were to engage them in a conversation, here's my questions. Okay, for just a minute, I will take your side of this conversation. What if being smaller had some health advantage? Okay, I just for clarity, I do not believe that, but let's just for a moment play devil's advocate and say, yes, if patients were smaller, they would be healthier. Okay, so for 50 years, you have been telling your patients, lose weight. How's that working out for you?
Mm.
Like, because guess what? Even if the goal is to lose weight, which as a side note, it's not, it doesn't work to tell people to lose weight. Like, you can't just do weight. Weight is a noun, it's not a verb.
Come on, that's
So,
good.
yeah. So losing the air quotes, my fingers are getting tired of the air. I know the podcast people can't see it, but we're doing some hardcore air quoting
Major,
here,
major.
major air quoting, that it doesn't even work in their own perspective. Like the belief system is that patients need to be smaller to be healthier. Well, guess what? What you're doing is not even making your patients smaller. And it is absolutely not making them healthier, because we know smaller isn't healthier. But that aside, it's not working.
Yeah.
So like, let's open our minds to like, maybe there's another way to approach this. Like if what we're doing isn't working, that's the whole idea of scientific progress. is find something else. I mean, that's the punchline.
Maggie, I don't know. You're thinking really
This
rationally
seems
here.
to
Like,
seem
I
a
don't
little
know.
too simple, but and it sounds, I mean, it really does sound comical to even say out loud because it sounds so ridiculous, but we get caught up when you're practicing medicine, you are in the weeds. I mean, the amount of pressures, and like I said, I'm not making excuses for doctors, but practicing medicine is a hairy deal. And there is so much to know and so much to contend with, and the system and this and that and that. Like, you don't really have time to stop and second guess and be cynical about everything you've ever been taught. Like, at some point, you are just taking information and applying it to the best of your abilities and just moving on and moving on and moving on. Um, and that's what I was doing. And honestly, that's when I had this cancer break in my life story. I had the luxury of time to deliberately question what I had been told. And that's where I got the answer. But see, most people don't either have the time, have the interest, have the bandwidth to do that. And you can't question everything. I mean, if you're going to sit there in medical school and every time you're taught something, say, wait a minute, I got to research that on my own, like, you'll never get through. I mean, you just, there's too much volume of information.
Mm.
But important stuff like this, where it's not working, where it's very clearly the way we're doing things not working, to me, that's like a low hanging fruit to sort of like address. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
there's something not right about this. And even if you can't put your finger on exactly what that is, it deserves a little investigation.
Yeah. That's so good. So let's grab something tangible here for the listeners, because most likely they're not all doctors listening to this who might have already turned it off by now if they were, and just enraged and going to find you on
They're like,
Instagram and
this,
send
they're
you
probably
one of
sending
those
me
notes.
sending me trolley messages. I know.
But that, the listeners, are going to go to these appointments, and we're hoping that's what they're doing, that they're going to feel empowered to even go back if they have stopped going. That if there's one or two things you could gift them with here in approaching that appointment in a new way, from an empowered point of view, that they actually do believe that it's beyond the weight, that their weight cannot be that guiding factor, what advice or tips or strategy would you give them? Hey, ladies, I know this episode's a little bit longer than my normal podcast episodes, but this interview already is absolute fire. And Maggie is about to share with us some amazing tips and strategies in the second half. You don't want to miss it. I mean, really, this is the stuff you can put into practice right now, whether you have a doctor's appointment coming up, or it's in the future, or maybe this is the stuff you've been talking to your coworkers, your family, your friends about, and you're like, I don't know what advice to give them. The second half of this podcast is going to be the answer. All right, I want to head back in so we can listen to these tips and strategies that Maggie has for us.
Right. So, first of all, you can decline to be weighed. You mentioned that you decline weights at your visit.
Absolutely.
You can decline to be weighed. And it's a urban legend that it's required for all visits. It's an urban legend that you can't get an antibiotic prescription if you don't have a weight, if you're an adult. Like, that's all bogus. Okay. I don't know who started that, but that is not true. The number of health conditions that require a today weight is very small and are very specialized. I mean, yes, if you're on dialysis and your doctor wants to weigh you, yeah, I'm sorry, you do need to be weighed. If you're getting chemotherapy, you actually do need to be weighed, and you're going to have to just deal with it. But that is not 99.9% of the reason people are in doctors' offices, to get chemotherapy and dialysis. So you don't have to be weighed. And there are ways to say that. And here's some like real tactical talking points, because people hear that and they say, okay, I get it. But like, what do I actually do when the MA is like dragging me down the hallway and is like, take your shoes off and get on the scale? Is you can say something as simple as, I'm going to opt out of the scale today, or I prefer not to be weighed today. I'm not sure that it's relevant for my visit today. Or here's a good one that is even less confrontational, is, I'm going to go ahead and pass for now. I'd like to talk to my doctor first about what the relevance is of my weight for today's visit. And so it just sort of like kicks the ball down the street a little bit. And the truth of it, once you're in the room talking to the doctor, having your visit, they're not going to drag you back out in the hallway to get your weight unless you're getting.
I've never had a doctor even, approach it. It's always been the pre-appointment.
Yeah,
And
it's the like preview. It's not the person and the person in the hallway. And here's the thing that will make you hopefully feel reassured in trying some of these talking points is the person who's actually doing the weighing, which is usually an MA or an LVN or something, they actually don't care. Like, they don't care about anything except for getting you into the exam room, getting the next person out of the waiting room, and getting their lunch break on time. They don't care. So I think the preconceived idea is there's going to be like this big fight about, no, you have to, and here's the reasons why you have to, and you're saying I won't do it, and they'll say do it, and it's 99 out of 100 times they'll be like, okay. Like it's going to be such a non-issue. You're not even going to believe that it's not an issue. So I encourage you to try that. The middle ground, if you're really not comfortable with that, is of course doing a blind weight where you stand on the scale backwards so that they get their weight if they feel so compulsed to have it, even though I still think you should refuse, but then you don't have to, see it and have it. Like the thing
that's where I mean, Maggie, that's where I started. I don't think
Right.
it's a bad starting point, if
Right,
that's what you feel
exactly.
most comfortable with, and just explaining to them. And I don't want to know
Right.
what the information is. I don't want to hear the weight or anything related to it if you still feel empowered to do so.
Right, exactly. And then here's the thing is a lot of patients are reticent to speak up with the doctor. Like they kind of let the doctor drive the conversation. All right. And if you're in a large body in particular, we know how that's going to go. We have plenty of observational evidence that that is going to focus the conversation on your weight. But if you lead the conversation and not in an aggressive, disrespectful way, but if you sort of lead the dance about what you intend to get out of this visit, why you are there, your specific reason of having that appointment, actually, not only will that divert the doctors at, focus on this weight thing, but it actually helps the doctor a lot. We want to get to the root of the problem. Whatever your problem is, whatever is the reason you showed up, believe it or not, we actually want to serve you in that way. We want to get the answer. We want you to be healthy and get the treatment you need or the diagnosis you need. We want you to be a quote satisfied customer. We want you to come back. We want you to stay in the healthcare system. That is the general feeling. We have trouble when, especially if it's a person you're a new patient and there's no established relationship, like we don't know up from down, like what is important to this person. I mean, do they have a really complicated social situation I need to get into? Is that not a big deal? Do they have eating issues? Do they have a complicated medical history? Like everything seems sort of equal when you don't know anything. But when the patient takes that lead to bring up like, hey, today I know I haven't met you before. I really am here for knee pain, and this is how it's affecting me at work. And this is my goals of what I'd like to be able to do. This is what I've tried in the past. Can we talk? And you sort of redirect that. You may have a higher probability of getting what you want out of the appointment.
I like that you can actually even do that well ahead of time. You can come in to that appointment and maybe that will help you, that confidence where you're prepared. Maybe you have your notes section on your phone or your old school and you write it down on a paper and you bring it in to show like I'm prepared also for this and this is what I want. And I don't know, like I like that idea of thinking ahead of
Right.
time. What is it you want? Because you are the one having this appointment.
Right.
This is your body. This is your health.
Right. And I'm not suggesting that the patients are responsible for ending weight stigma in medical care.
No.
I want to make sure that's not what I'm saying, but like when all other things are equal and there's just like this big blank space, your diet culture influenced doctor in a weight centered environment is going to focus on weight. I mean, that's like the default when there's no other guidance. But if you have specific concerns, specific questions, and we love informed patients who have good questions, who want to know more, who are participants. I mean, we want you to be a participant. Like this old school deal of like, in a doctor walks in the room and the patient is silent and the doctor touches you and tells you what to do and you say yes sir and you walk out of the room, like that's old school. Like no, that's not our current practice model. So we want to be partners in this, and you are allowed to take the lead. And that might be a helpful thing to do if you're afraid that this whole thing is going to get derailed by the scale and this sort of stuff.
Those are
Yeah.
really great points to both things. And I love that you gave some specific language and some things you can really just very tactily do. Again, whether it's before or you just have it in your head, whether it's written down or not, to show up with that. I've been on both sides where I let doctors lead after lead, and leaving there, not feeling empowered, feeling again, I need to lose weight. And I'm not in a larger body, yet I've always had that experience up until I drew a very clear line in the sand. Now, I'll tell you, Maggie, I do still get some funny looks. I do still get a little, you're not. I said, you can just put patient refusal there, whatever you need to put
Yeah.
in your system. However, I leave so much more empowered. I leave there feeling like I
Right.
am in the one in the driver's seat, and that's the ending goal I want to experience now at the
Yeah.
end of a doctor's visit.
Healthcare is such a privilege, and it is this precious little interaction that we have. So you're there to get care. You're there to get health care. Okay. You're not there to impress the doctor. You're not there to become friends with the doctor. You're not there to pacify the doctor. Really, truly, you deserve to get what you want out of that visit, the information you want out of that visit. I'm not saying you go in there and demand antibiotics. So that's like that will drive me insane. But no, but you get to you deserve complete and total information for your current concern. And if you go in with that in mind, and that gives you something to focus on instead of thinking like, oh, this is going to be awful. Last time they wanted to weigh me and then he told me I'd lose weight and I didn't lose any weight since I was here last time. And what's he going to say? And blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Like we do it's sort of self-defeating to presume how bad it's going to be before it's happened, if that makes sense. And know that the stuff I'm telling you is not the mainstream conversation. So you are going to get weird looks. You are going to get questioned. You are going to get, now, I don't think it should be aggressive and confrontational. I mean, and you have the right to know, like if they say, well, I really do need to weigh you because I'm going to give you antibiotics for your sinus infection. Be like, oh, you do? So could you use my weight from the last visit? What if I weigh X number of pounds? Just make something up. Who cares? And it doesn't matter. See, that's the thing, is that people don't realize it doesn't matter. And when you catch the doctor trying to they kind of leverage this white coat authority, but like an antibiotic prescription, an outpatient oral antibiotic prescription for an adult, guess what? It's the same. It's the same whether you weigh 85 pounds, 285 pounds, 485 pounds. I'm telling you the truth. It's the same antibiotic. So don't even for a minute think that like when you have strep throat and they're like, oh, I can't give you your penicillin until you're weighed. No. I want to talk to the pharmacist. I don't, that doesn't make it, and I'm not trying to make it an antagonistic thing, but it's just, there's a lot of misbeliefs that weight is super important for all these reasons that it's really not.
I think overall, Maggie, what I hear too is we can do better. Like we can do better in the healthcare system. We can do better in the field that we're talking about here in the medical profession, can do better.
Oh yeah, we can do better. But at minimum, like, please don't do worse. Like, let's just, I would love for all the doctors to like get on board with health at every size and learn about this and learn about intuitive eating and stop weighing their patients. And that's great. That's very cutting edge and innovative. And I hope it catches on like wildfire. Until then, I'm actually sort of okay with the doctors at least not weight shaming their patients and making this whole experience worse. Like, if you're not going to make it better, pretty please don't make it worse.
Pretty please. If we could just ask for one thing, don't make it worse. And again, I think, just to reiterate your point, Maggie, we want you coming back for those appointments. Yes. We want you getting the care that you need. We want, what you need being addressed. So don't, if maybe you haven't found the right doctor, and, we do live in this culture where you oftentimes have a choice. I know not everyone has that choice in their healthcare and who they can see, but if you have an opportunity and you can find someone else, because maybe that person doesn't suit you, that medical professional, that business, if you have an opportunity, look for somewhere else. And maybe you might feel more empowered to ask some new questions as you're seeking different care.
Sure, of course. And there's, I mean, because doctors are just people. Like
Yeah.
doctors, like not everybody likes every haircut they get. Like I go to a very specific lady who cuts my hair because like I can't say she's like the best haircut lady on the surface of the earth, but I like how she does it.
Yeah.
And so I choose to go there. And it is a privilege to be able to pick your healthcare, but even if you don't have the opportunity to be super selective, you can have sort of a conversation ahead of time. People forget to do that too, is you can communicate with an office, particularly if you're a new patient. You can communicate before your visit, either by phone, by email, and just talk to either the provider, talk to the lead nurse, talk to the office manager, and be like, hey, here's the deal. I've had such and such experience in the past with other doctors. I'm coming here as a new patient. I want to make sure that I'm able to be seen in sort of a weight inclusive way, and set up that ahead of time. That's fine. That's fair to do. You can do that. That doesn't, and they're not going to like charge you extra money for sending them an email or something. I mean, so just know that you are invited to be part of it. And in this particular situation, I'm not putting the responsibility on your shoulders, but it will help facilitate a good interaction if you take a leadership role in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Maggie, I could probably sit here and talk to you for
I
another
know. Is
hour
there
and a
any
half.
listeners left? Are you
There's,
all
I
still
know
there?
there's so many things I want to cover. So I might just have to have you back on because your perspective is really valuable. And I love how you would just like head first dove into the research and the information, and you're bringing that to the world, and I'm unbelievably grateful. Which really leads me into one last point is, what we take in, the information, the things we see, the things we hear, really do have an effect on us. And if I wasn't in this space and Maggie wasn't in this space, as well, we probably wouldn't have met, very
Right.
unlikely. But we've chosen who and what, is influencing, is it we're hearing the messages. Social media has a huge impact. We're on it all the time. We're just realistic. It's probably how you found this podcast is, on Instagram, you found it maybe because Maggie, me. What you take in is important. And I want you to really take a look at that feed. And if you're not following Maggie, I'm not really sure what you're doing with your life, because not only does she bring such valuable information, her Instagram reels are something else. This woman brings it with humor to invite you into a real conversation about what she's addressing. So Maggie, would you just share how they can connect with you, where they can connect with you, and a little bit more about just your practice?
Well, absolutely. Thank you for saying all that, Jen. It's what you surround yourself with, what any of us surround ourselves with, that becomes our perception of reality. I mean, that's how it is in any way. I'm not just talking about diet culture. I'm talking about just that's how your life is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that influences your belief system and everything. And so I think that's great advice to sort of curate your experience. But I'm easy to find. I'm Maggie Landes, MD, everywhere. That is my website, maggielandesmd.com. I'm Maggie Landes, MD on Instagram, Facebook. I have a free private Facebook group for women. And so if that sounds like something that's of interest to you, I'm happy to invite any of your listeners into that community where we're, having these conversations and bringing up issues that we are all struggling with. And I do primarily group coaching, and all that information is on my website. Plus I have a podcast too. I clearly like to talk.
These Enneagram threes and all their talking. I don't
The
know.
Enneagram 3. I love the Enneagram. The Eatfluencer podcast. That's the name of my podcast.
Yes,
So yes, we're
absolutely. I'll
almost
make sure I link
celebrating a
everything.
birthday. Yeah, it's been
Oh,
about a year. I'm not sure when this episode is airing, but my podcast birthday is in October. So we're, a full year of podcasting under my belt.
I absolutely enjoy your podcast. I'm going to link everything below so that anyone who's interested can connect with you.
Sounds perfect. Well, thank you for having me.
After that episode, you might be wondering, what's next? Well, don't worry, I've got you. You can do a couple of things right now. If you go into the show notes wherever you're listening to this podcast, I have links to my Instagram, my website, and you can get on my newsletter. I connect with you each and every week so we can hang out on the podcast and in your inbox. If you just listened to this episode and you are ready to walk away from diet culture, but you're not sure what the next steps are, book a free consult with me. You can do that by heading into the show notes or going to www.healthcoach4life.com. I have limited availability for one-on-one coaching, and if it's for you, grab your spot now.